Jide Koladio Titojo and Tunde Abaton. Journalist Hangout starts now. There is a halt in hostility regarding the showdown between organized labor and the federal government, and that's over the vexed issue of new national minimum wage. Nigerians can now heave a temporary sigh of relief as the Nigeria Labour Congress (NLC) and the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria (TUC) suspended its two-day-old strike for 1 week. This followed the federal government's agreement to offer a new minimum wage higher than its initial offer of 60,000 naira. This agreement was reached after a joint meeting on Monday. The federal government is expected to resume talks with organized labor to continue negotiations for a new national minimum wage. Let's share the story of the signing of the agreement by TVC News' Jokiadisa with you.
Nigeria's economy came to a standstill as organized labor makes real its threat to begin an indefinite strike. This intervention meeting by the federal government, which lasted for over 5 hours, shows signs of a fruitful outcome as government representatives and labor leaders appear to be on the same page. The leader of the federal government delegation and secretary to the government of the federation, George Akume, reads out a communique signed by both parties. He says President Bola Tinubu is committed to giving a minimum wage that is more than the 60,000 naira earlier proposed. It was also agreed that all state governors will be carried along to ensure compliance.
His Excellency Bola Ahmed Tinubu CFR is committed to a national minimum wage that is higher than 60,000. The tripartite committee is to meet every day for the next 1 week with a view to arriving at an agreeable national minimum wage.
Labour leaders say they will have to return to their organs to report progress for a likely suspension of the strike.
The appropriate organs are the only people that can suspend the strike, not these people standing here. So when we take all these things to the organs, if they so decide, it will be suspended.
You could see that in the agreement, there's a commitment that they will do much more than, higher than the 60,000, using the exact words in the agreement.
The Minister of Information and National Orientation and his Labour and Employment counterpart said the country's loss to just 1 day of the national industrial action cannot be quantified.
Labour had agreed to come back to negotiating table with the understanding that the president has been reached and is committed to making sure that the new minimum wage negotiation is concluded.
You can't stop a nation from moving for 24 hours or for 12 hours and think that everything will be normal. I think the loss is not quantifiable for now, but I do also know that we need to recover.
24 hours of a nationwide strike and the nation is counting its losses, but the federal government has moved to avert further loss, and the assurance at the end of this meeting is that Nigerian workers will have a new and acceptable minimum wage in the next 1 week. Jokiadisa, TVC News, Abuja.
Well, organized labor says it has now relaxed that strike for 1 week, hoping that at the end of that period, a negotiation would be completed and would have a new national minimum wage. Jide, what do you make of these goings on?
This is a piece of good news. We expected them to return to the negotiation table. That is what they've agreed to do now. A strike so early into the negotiation is undesirable. The ideal thing is what Labour has agreed to do. Continue the negotiation. Let's see where the negotiation takes us. Not to throw the whole nation into an industrial action. And Labour has to be flexible Nobody can pay 494,000. It's not going to happen. The president represents the federal government and the federating states in our country. But we must tell ourselves the truth, that even if the federal government is capable of paying a particular sum, how about the states? Have we turned minimum wage to a big joke or a farce whereby we simply declare minimum wage and it's not enforceable, it's not sustainable, it's not affordable? We got to think about that, because the law ought to be complied with. But what we see is a situation in which some states have not even paid 18,000 minimum wage as we speak.
You mean 18 or 13?
18, I know what I'm talking about. 18. Many states have not paid 30,000. So the minimum wage that was instituted in 2011, some states are still struggling to pay. Many states have not paid 30,000 as minimum wage. We want them to pay 494. That's a big joke.
Organized labor says this is based on indices, market prices, hike in electricity tariff, and all of those points that they just brought together.
See, let's just tell ourselves the truth. You have to also look at, I think some people assume that our country is so rich. Ajero, as president of Nigeria, cannot pay a minimum wage of 494,000. If he runs an enterprise of his own, maybe it's a business, he does some business on the sidelines, he cannot pay a minimum wage of 494,000. I know. I don't believe in deceiving myself. How did they arrive at 494,000 as minimum wage? Initially, they were even talking about 615. So, the point that I'm making is minimum wage moving from 30,000 to maybe something in the region of 100,000 or a little more is desirable. I want to see that happen. I have people who will benefit if that happens. So, but we have to be reasonable. And I've seen what has happened in the last few days that showed to me a clear lack of reasonableness. A situation in which you go and shut down the national grid. See, I think that going forward, because it doesn't look like the NLC under Ajero will still not go on strike. Under some administrations, we had very, very few nationwide strikes. But in 1 year, we've seen how many strikes Ajero has brought on our nation. Even when he was beaten up in Imo State, they caused a national strike to happen. And now what I'm saying now is the National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, will be failing in his responsibility or responsibilities as the National Security Advisor if he permits a shutdown of the national grid to happen again. He will be thoroughly incompetent as National Security Advisor.
How would that be prevented? Because workers there are members of organized labor and they tell you they have to obey directives from the national budget.
No. It is irresponsible to shut down the national grid. It is unlawful to shut down the national grid. The Trade Union Act forbids it. The Trade Union Act is very clear. If we are not being led by the nose by people who have brushed aside law and order, there is nowhere in the world, and I challenge anybody to tell me, where in the world, in the name of strike, you shut down the national grid of a country.
All right.
No, don't. I'm still on this point. In South Africa, I talked about South Africa yesterday. Let anybody fact check me. The electricity corporation of a country is tied to national security because so many things can go wrong when you shut down. Maybe in the past they did this. A baton has been around for some time. You can recall that when some people tried it, they were jailed. The law is clear. It's clear. Look, I've done a lot of research. The law is clear. There is nowhere in our laws that you are permitted to go and shut down the national grid. And if people will keep shutting down the national grid, they deserve to go to jail. That's why I'm saying that. And to say that, I mean, if you are in Egypt, for example, you go and shut down national grid of Egypt or Rwanda, who can try that? Who can try that? No one. No one. You can't do it in the US. People go on strike in the US. South Africa is the strike capital of the world. They go on strike anytime they like. But when it comes to essential services, they dare not. So this is the thing. We can't have a situation where people will not know that there are limitations when it comes to going on strike. There are limitations. Some of my friends who even support labor, some of my friends who are based abroad who support labor, they've been telling me that that amounts to treason, high treason. It amounts to economic sabotage to go and shut down the national grid. They got away with it during President Buhari's time. And now they've done it again. That's only the third time in our history that they tried it. The first time they tried it, they were jailed. Because the law is very clear. If we have time, I will read out the sections of the law that deals specifically with essential services. You don't go there.
Right.
How do you explain going to hospitals to push people out that they should not work? They must not save lives because you want a minimum wage. We are not saying that it is not desirable. We have asked for it before. But we cannot behave like in our country we are not governed by laws. No, we can't. And if Ribadu permits this to happen again, if we cannot put people to protect national security assets, if we cannot protect it, then it's not up to his job.
All right.
I say that with all seriousness.
All right, Jide. And thankfully, we have a lawyer who would also share, some legal perspectives with us on this matter. The national grid was shut down at about 2:19 a.m. Monday. This is 5:13 p.m. It's still down, and the strike has been relaxed. So the promptness with which it was shut down isn't exactly effective.
No. The point is, you cannot.
The pace.
You cannot. When you shut down, you can't expect it to come on immediately. That's why you look at even oil workers, senior oil workers are not permitted to go on strike. Because once you do that, to then get it back, very long. This is what they've thrown us into. It's not as if, it's something you can switch on. No. It's not like that.
All right, so let's get Tunde's view on this.
Well, I think I was very happy yesterday around 12 noon when I read the Attorney General of the Federation reminding those people that what they have done is treasonable. And I was very happy that he can do that. Because a lot of Nigerians who are making comments on national issues, they are very ignorant of what they are saying. They are ignorant of the fact that some people were jailed 25 years towards the end of Shagari's government because they shut down the national grid. The national grid is the national security of the country. And when you bring down the national security, like MK Abela used to say, if you want to drink from a well, you don't urinate inside the well you are going to drink from. When you shut down the national grid, you have compromised the national security of the country. And when you compromise the national security of the country, you never know whether you are part of these people who will recover from that shutting down of the national security. To shut down the national grid means that every other avenues has been exploited. And yet, even during wartime, you don't even stop food supply to people. Talk less of when I read that shut down the national grid, for what? Have they exhausted all the available means towards negotiation? At the end of the day, they went back to the drawing board yesterday evening. So what came to my mind was that probably these people meant more than, there is a more to it than meets the eye. There's more to what the labor is doing. And like Gide said, if the National Security Advisor, backed by the Attorney General of the Federation, fail to do anything about this. I read in the communique yesterday evening that they were saying that the government should promise them that they will not do anything to those people who called the strike. That is arrant nonsense. We are not led by the nose in this country. And people should know that all of us here, we are affected by whatever is happening in Nigeria today. So people should not be unnecessarily emotional. And when they become too emotional by this thing, it means there is more political motive. I can say it with all sense of responsibility. Yes. There's a political motive behind shutting down a national grid because we are confused. What is the population? Now, at the last count, the number of federal civil service workers, they are about 1.7 million. And at the last audit, it was only 700,000 that was verified. Look at all the states. The state that employ more is Lagos State, maybe about 25,000. Multiply that by all the states of the Federation. Nigeria is about 220 million. The economy of this country is being sustained by the remaining 200 million of this particular country. When you not shut down that economy, how do you expect those people to breathe? And knowing, like he said, that it's not easy to shut down a national grid and to reactivate it back. It's like pumping somebody who has a low sugar to high sugar. It's already very difficult. But somebody has high, you can bring it down. So for what these people have done, they have demonstrated that they are not patriotic Nigerians. And I think all organizations should look very well at those people that they elect to come and lead them at any point in time. Because when you have a national crisis like this, you know those people who are patriotic about the country. What they have done by shutting down the national grid is a compromise of the national security system. And it's a challenge. This is not politics. This is pure common sense. Yes, negotiations are serious. And I will encourage the federal government to keep the doors open, to continue negotiating with them. But for anybody who should think that Nigeria can afford 494,000, it's like returning us to Zimbabwe, where they use basket to carry money. Only this month, the NNPC was able to reach 1.9 million barrels per day. OPEC gave us 2.5 million barrels per day. As of last year, we cannot even meet it. So if you cannot meet 2.5 million barrels per day, there's no way we can earn enough money to even service our debt and to service our country. And now you went ahead and shut down the national grid. Where are they going to?
They even went to the seaports.
Seaport and the store seaport.
All these things are unheard of.
This is unreasonable. For how many people? This is unreasonable. We are all affected. Yes, and every civil servant can have families. But to say that if you are not paying 494,000 naira, I think they are talking from the moon. And I think they mean more than what they are saying. And there's an ulterior motive for going the extra mile in shutting down the national. A country that can shut down, even in situation of war, that is extreme, don't take certain extreme steps that will undermine the national security of the country. I think they have done that, and they have shot themselves in defeat.
And it affected virtually every sector of the economy, even education. Yes. Students who were writing, WASCE, the West Africa Senior Secondary Certificate Examination. Some of them were unable to write, and so you wonder how they are able to, get back to maybe receive the exam because it's going on across.
How do they
across the West Africa sub-region?
That they are doing simultaneously in different countries.
All right.
The law is clear.
Yes, Judy.
That talking about essential services. Let me read. No person, that is the Trade Union Act, Section 43(1)(a). No person shall subject any other person to any kind of constraint or restriction of his personal freedom in the course of persuasion. 1B says no trade union or registered federation of the trade unions or any member thereof shall in the course of any strike action compel any person who is not a member of his union to join any strike. Even that one, they breached that one. The Miscellaneous Offences Act. Tampering with electric plants, works, etc. Any person who unlawfully disconnects, removes, damages, tampers, meddles with, or in any way whatsoever interferes with any plant, works, cables, wire, or assembly of wires designed or used for transforming or converting electricity shall be guilty of an offense and liable on conviction to be sentenced to imprisonment for life. 10. Any person who unlawfully disconnects, removes, damages, tampers, meddles with, or in any way whatsoever interferes with any electric fittings, meters, or any appliances used for generating, transforming, converting, conveyancing, supplying, or selling electricity shall be guilty of an offense and liable on conviction to imprisonment for a term of not exceeding 21 years. There are other areas that they shouldn't have gone to that they went to. Essential services, even CBN staff. You can't compare CBN staff to join your strike. They are part of essential service. Those who work in security, printing and minting company, they are also deemed to be part of essential service, just like hospitals. But we have a situation in which people went switched off the national grid and recorded themselves. That is high treason. And again, I'm saying that, look, because we know the strike will not end, they will still find a way to go on strike. If they switch off the national grid again and no Ribadu is there, he can't call the security agents to secure our national asset, then he knows that he's not up to his job. I do not expect this to happen again, because it will now show that, oh, we have laws, but some people are bigger than our laws. Ajero, or anybody for that matter, is not bigger than the laws of our country. The laws of our country are meant to be obeyed. When they're on strike, there's no country in the world where they strike like South Africa. When they go on strike, they know that essential services must go on. And what they've designed is, when there is dispute in respect of essential services in South Africa, they are dealt with by arbitration so that they can be speedily resolved, because they don't want a situation in which people on essential services will then go on strike. Mm-hmm. So whatever we have to do, there are lessons from this. And the lesson is nobody should be permitted, allowed to get close to switching off the national grid. I'm not saying don't go on strike. Go on strike. I'm not saying don't ask for minimum wage that is far bigger than what you have now. I support it. But know your boundary, know your limitations. Because if we permit this sort of thing to happen, then we are a country, we are moving into the Obesian state of nature, where people can do what they like and get away with it. We can't run a country in that manner, where government will fold its arms and watch people do things that the law says they should not do. No, we can't have that. We can't have that. People can't behave just the way they like because they are unionists. Oh, we keep our national grid, we now put it in the hands of unionists who can come at any time and switch off because they got away with it under President Buhari. We saw Oshomole do strikes in this country. I've known Oshomole as a union leader in Arewa Tex in Kaduna, where I started my career. Oshomole rose to become the president of the NLC. He fought Obasanjo on some occasions. You can accuse him that, oh, he was chummy with them later on. But he led this country to successful national strikes. But he never went as far as switching off the national grid. Let people fact check me. And you cannot say Oshomole is not stubborn. You can't. Till tomorrow he remains a stubborn person. But stubbornness, especially when you want to attain a goal, must be aligned with common sense. Not to wage a war against your country because you want more money. No. You can abuse me all they like. But let them tell me one country, whether it's in America, where we regard as the kings of democracy, where somebody will have the audacity to go and switch off the national grid, so even at state level.
So those limitations need not just to be in our law books. Now, they must be
obeyed. And they were obeyed in the past.
And they must be enforced.
They must be enforced.
Nobody can be bigger than Nigeria.
Do you think that if no Ribadu put soldiers there, gun-toting soldiers, if he put soldiers there, do you think they'll be able to do it? In Osogbo here, the control center, they were beating people up.
Yeah, do you remember that at the meeting they had yesterday in the office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Nuhu Ribadu came, with the retinue of course, statutory soldiers and all that guarding him. And then the report on social media, Organized Labour spoke out that the place was being guarded by soldiers. If anything happened to the members, they should be held liable and all that. And there had to be clarification that these were just people guarding the NSA?
You see, the problem is that most of our people, actually, you call us journalists, most of us act out of ignorance. Or either we are biased or we are mischievous. Because the National Security Advisor has every reason whatsoever to secure anywhere he is at any point in time. So when I read the comment that NSC was saying that he went to TCN, the military people went to CCN to prevent them from doing, you see, it's unfortunate. It's because we have never made an excuse of anybody. And if you know that the country is in dire economic strait, you don't add to the problem of that particular country. And I think at this particular point in time, the mere fact that we are in crisis does not mean that we should not obey our law. The President, the Attorney General, I was happy by what he said yesterday, and the National Security Advisor should enforce the law as contained in the Constitution of Nigeria.
No more.
This is arrant nonsense.
No more.
Can the President of NSC, can he pay 494 naira to his megad? No,
that's why they pay 494 naira to their megad. He will not pay minimum wage of 494,000.
Can they pay 444 naira to their megad, who is as an employee, or to their even driver? Can they pay 494 naira?
You even know the implications. There is what we call consequential adjustment. Every time you do minimum wage, all the other people, minimum wage usually affect maybe plus or minus level 1
to 7, yes.
All the other people, they will benefit because the government will ensure that your pay does not catch up with your bosses. Yes. So everybody right up to level 17, they will all have monies added so that their juniors will not catch up with them. And that also involves tons of money. So when people think that it's only the junior people that are affected, no, every time you increase minimum wage, everybody benefits. Everybody gets salary increase. It's just that they determine the percentage. Some will get maybe 5% raise, depending on how high you are. The higher you are, the lower the percentage that they will add to your listen. But even this one now, because it's high, the consequential adjustments will be really huge. It will be massive. Right. We have to think of the implications. Can we afford this? Then are we turning this to a joke whereby, okay, let's just give them. If the states don't pay, no problem. But the law says everybody must comply. Every employer of labor must comply. We are moving into a realm now where people will just leave you, okay, do the minimum wage. Maybe it is what I can afford that I can pay. Okay. Nigerian companies, they are gasping. Yes. Taxation is killing companies in Nigeria. If they cannot even generate electricity, for their businesses. Businesses are closing down. And you want private sector to pay 494. They say this is what they can pay. At the end of the day, maybe President Tinubu will succeed in bullying him, and maybe President Tinubu, okay, we can do 100. If he does 100, the private sector, they are not likely. And you cannot enforce it. How many people are you going to arrest? It's the duty of the labor minister to enforce it. But how many labor ministers have successfully enforced minimum wage in our country?
We need to take a break. And when we come back, we'll definitely continue this conversation, and then we'll have Justice Ujena also join us on the program. Please stay with us.
The Inspector General of Police has met with senior officers to review the state of security.
We are continuing our coverage of the arrest of Godwin Emefiele.
The Senate has summoned the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria to properly brief the Senate regarding the state of the economy.
President Bola Tinubu has announced the total removal of fuel subsidy.
The fresh subsidy is gone. What I will never take is threat.
Let's now bring you more development from Ibadan, the Oyo State capital, where an explosion has taken place. Tell us about this incident.
TVC News. First with breaking news.
Thank you for staying with us on the program Journalist Hangout. We're still talking about the industrial action by Labour, which has now been relaxed for 1 week for negotiations to continue. Labour says it's back to 494,000 naira, and government has said it is willing. The president is committed to paying a minimum wage that is higher than 60,000 naira. We do not know what the conclusion would be just yet, but then we hope that the negotiations would come up with something. But then we're talking about some of the limitations, what should not have been done even while the strike lasted on Monday, one of which was the shutting down of the national grid, which is yet to come back up in most parts of the country. I don't know, Jude, is there power supply in your home?
No, I don't even know what's going on now, but what I know is what I talked about earlier, that when you switch off, it takes some time, before you can get things back on. But these ones are behaving like enemies of Nigeria, so it's like they don't even care, It is clear in section 31, subsection 6 of the Trade Union Act that you cannot involve people in essential services in your strike. 31(6) says no person, trade union or employer shall take part in a strike or lockout or engage in any conduct in contemplation or furtherance of a dispute unless the person, the trade union or employer, is not engaged in the provision of essential services. Section 31(6). Except the person is not engaged in essential services. B6b says the strike or lockout concerns a labor dispute that constitutes a dispute. Right. From the above provisions, there are 4 important conditions that workers in Nigeria must fulfill before they can embark on a lawful strike. The workers and their union must not be engaged in the provision of essential services. It's very clear. The union must have conducted a ballot at which a simple majority of all registered members voted to go on strike. And then I talked about South Africa. In South Africa, persons engaged in essential services are precluded from participating in any strike. But as an alternative to participation in a strike, such persons are compelled to refer their disputes to arbitration. It's so simple. Because the damage that you do to a country can be incalculable. You cannot restore what you have destroyed. You can't.
Absolutely not.
So this is why this issue is of concern to me. The president can pay 1 million as minimum wage if he thinks he can afford it. But no more, not again should we permit people to shut down the national grid.
All right, then. We'll wait to see how the National Security Advisor reacts to this. But actually, how hopeful are you about this week break that they're having? They are hoping that within this period they're able to come up with something tangible.
Well, I think that when you are a door, you see the outside and you see the inside. The government knows its own financial position. These have faced the financial position of the 36 states of the country and the 774 local governments of the country, because the local government workers too are civil servants.
Yes.
So when you know that this is a country where we have never sat down to measure the productivity or worth of an average civil servant to know whether you deserve to earn a particular money or not. Yes, we have to earn a living wage, but we have to be realistic based on what we are making as a country. Like I said the other time, Nigeria is just struggling to make 1.9 million liters barrel per day against 2.5 million liters because our source of income is 90% basically oil export. Now, within the next 1 week, I want to see the labor being reasonable enough to assess the situation and to advise themselves to accept that one which is practicable. Because, mark you, go and write it down, after the federal government has said, we are still going to experience war in these 36 states of Nigeria. Because most of them will not be able to pay us and at when due.
And they are the majority.
Have a situation, what happened when Shagari was overthrown in 1983. As of December 31, 1983, there are some states out of the 19 states that cannot pay. About 7 states in Nigeria are owing salary for 12 months by the time Buhari took over. Go and check.
All right.
So we don't need a situation to go back to that level. Because if the president should say 100,000, 150,000, the state will be in strike for the next 2 years. or 3 years. They will not be able to afford it.
All right. Joining us via Zoom for more discussion on this issue is a lawyer and the lead partner at Eco Solicitors and Advocates, Justice Ojeno. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening to you. It's my pleasure joining you and to all our viewers all across the world.
Thank you. I'm sure you've been following developments regarding the strike. And in the course of that, we saw the national grid shut down. You know, there have been discussions as to the legality of that action as a way of showing disaffection with, goings on in the country. So what is the legal angle to that? What does the law say about those actions, and what should be the limitations to industrial actions?
Okay, first, while discussing any conversation with respect to essential services, we'll start from Section 11 of our Constitution. And to a large extent, that also gives a rise to the provisions of the Trade Disputes Act that expressly, for the sake of national security, as abundantly illuminated by the great BKO and Mr. Baton on panel, it's for excellent reason. The nation cannot burn down. I fully am against the strategy employed by Labour in this situation, the Scott-Ed policy that they employed in order to be able to carry out whatever it is their particular end is. I will stop strongly before speculating, but I want to just say that there is more to it than meets the eye. The law is very, very clear that persons in essential services, even if even they want to protest, or they want to even as much as be absent from work for any particular reason, they have to do a notice of 15 days. Not just them, even other persons who are not in essential services, there must be a notice of a formal notice of 15 days. I think that is abundantly absent in this situation, and the Minister of Justice also, of course, to that end, illuminated and drew their attention back to the provisions of the law with respect to this. And I am very, very sure that the Minister of Justice didn't even know that they will not stop short of going the extent of shutting down the national grid and the hospitals and all other essential staff members. I'm sure that I didn't know. If they had known, maybe if the National Security Advisor had known, they would have
taken steps,
been a bit more stringent in the liberal manner they allow the Labour to take more than it has the power to do. So I feel that to a large extent, in order to forestall things like this from happening in the future, the work doesn't even just stop at the office of the National Security Advisor. It goes back to the Federal Attorney General. There's a pending judgment of the National Industrial Court since June of last year that is preventing the Labour from even going on strike at all. How has that, till the matter got to, why do you also feel that, in addition to that, people should be prosecuted?
Well, Justice, will get back to you in a moment. Let's hope that we're able to get, the network working well again. So, Tunde, let's come back to you here. Justice has, of course, given credence to what you've said in the studio here, that it does appear, there's some sinister motive. It does appear that what is happening, there is more to it.
I think, like the man has said, I think they just played on the intelligence or the probably liberality of both the NSA and the Attorney General. If we have provided for more far-sighted, you should have known that people like Ajero, since this government started, every other excuse, every other thing, he will go on strike. He will go on strike. It's like a husband who is in the habit of telling the wife, I will divorce you, I will divorce you. One day the woman will stand up to him and say, you are too much. Things are worse. So I think government should be proactive enough. Both the NSA and the Attorney General should have known that these people can go to any extent. They are now taking Nigeria for granted. And the mere fact that you are a labor is just a mini school of Nigeria. We have a very tiny part of 220 million people. You cannot take us for granted at all. Yes, it is normal for you to ask for your rights. But I think the Attorney General and the NSA should also enforce the laws of Nigeria. Yes. Any protest that you do should be within the confines of the law of Nigeria. And Ajaero and Co. cannot claim ignorance of the law, because ignorance is not excuse in the law. They have committed a treasonable offense in which they must be put in the dock. A lot of people have died because of this strike in the hospital. Yes. Going to the hospital, you have also no right to ask people to join you in a strike.
No, you can't force people.
You can't force people to
The law is clear.
It's very clear about that. You have no right to force people. So I think that this is a lesson for both the Attorney General, especially the people in charge of security, for some miscreants to just walk to the national grid and shut it down.
All right. But then should we have even gotten to the point of a strike? There are other avenues that could have been explored.
So, under Ajaero, strike is usually the first option. And I'm saying that we had governments in the past where you could count on your fingertips in 8 years how many national strikes we had.
Right. I understand justice.
And you are supposed to give a length of time before a strike. You are also supposed to obey the law. Justice was talking about the fact that there is an injunction, you know, at the, what is it called, this court?
The National
Industrial Court, which they've been disobeying, you know. So, and you are supposed to even give, remember Baba Kokori before he died, the last interview that TVC had with him, he said, how do you do a national, you call out, Baba Kokori was a labor leader in his own right, one of the greatest. He said, how do you call a national strike with as little as 3 days notice? That is not done.
There is more to it than this.
All right, let's get Justice. Justice, it's good to have you back. So you were saying something about the subsisting order, you know, which ought to be obeyed.
I say it's my pleasure again. I'm sorry. It can also be the national grid that actually caused the issue. So everybody is just
All right, so land on your thoughts, and then, you know, we'll talk about...
I don't know where, okay.
You were talking about the, you know, judgment at the National Industrial Court. So let's talk about that, and the fact that should we have even gotten to the point of embarking on strike? Are there no other avenues, alternatives that should have been explored before this economic and paralysis of the entire nation, really?
Okay, for me, like I always say, I tell all my clients and anybody that has ears to hear, no matter the order of court, whether you are comfortable with it or not, you just have to obey it. I'm sure that we may not even be able to use that as a broad strategy because of what's happening in Kano and River State, where people are now being forced to pick and choose between orders of court to obey. And I think that's very, very likely unfortunate, and whatever it is the Chief Justice of Nigeria is doing about that should be sped up and should be really enforced so that we won't have situations where some people are trying to legitimize how to not obey court orders. So that said, with respect to other strategies that can be employed, definitely it is very, very obvious that first, we must admit, and just like PKO and Mr. Baton have said, the labor, they have a right to go on strike. And I also must boldly say that labor is about the only pressure group who can stand up to the federal government as we stand today. The principle of checks and balances, the legislature is not doing it as strong as it ought on the streets. So it may be that, okay, it's only labor that can hold the executive to account. But in holding the executive to account, they must do it within the bounds of the law. I support going on strike fully, but it has to be within the bounds of the law. Because if everybody decides to go outside of the bounds of the law, and just like Nikhil has also said, we go back to the Obesan
state of nature.
And nobody is guaranteed to survive except the person that is physically strongest, and of course, when the physically strongest at some point will grow old and die. So we must keep the engagement on. I blame also the government to a large extent. The government didn't have to let it degenerate to this point before we are embarking on strike and on strike and on strike. I heard it from somewhere that every day the economy shuts down, like yesterday and today, we lose about $1.2 billion. I don't know how accurate that is, but if it is by any stretch of imagination accurate, that is humongous. How much is our total economy? Last time I checked, I think it's less than $400 billion. So if we now do this for 50 days or 400 days, I know that it's possible that even the people that seem to be supporting the strike a bit, they will put on labor. And one more thing that labor ought to have done is to be strategic and be wise. Common sense. When people are in their house, we call a strike, you have to let them have power supply so that they will be comfortable in their house. You have to let them, because power supply is also attached to water flow. You must let products flow.
I hear you, Justice. We need to take a moment. We need to take a break. When we come back, we would continue where we stopped. Please stay with us.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am thrilled to share the exciting news about the success of the first phase of the Super Pilot Program screening exercise. Over 2 weeks, we reached every corner of our great nation, covering all 109 senatorial districts. The response was overwhelming and incredibly positive. This initial screening focused on artisans across all trade areas who registered on our super platform. I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the dedicated staff of the Industrial Training Fund ITF for their overwhelming commitment, and all the artisans in Nigeria who participated for their patience. Looking ahead, the second phase of the screening will commence soon. Remember, only registered artisans on our super platform are eligible for screening. So, if you haven't registered yet, now is the time to do so. The super training program is structured to train 100,000 artisans per phase. If you didn't make it into the first phase, don't worry. Future batches will include you. Excitingly, our next major activity will begin in June with soft skill training. These include professional ethics, basic health and safety practices, and certification in artisan project management. A special thanks to the Chartered Institute of Project Managers of Nigeria for collaborating with ITF to develop a tailor-made curriculum for this program. The Renewed Hope Agenda for Artisan is committed to enhancing the skill of Nigerian artisans, improving the well-being of our citizens, and contributing to our nation's economic prosperity. The President has tasked ITF with reaching as many artisans as possible, and we are fully dedicated to do this because the President has sent a message that all artisans in Nigeria are his candidates. So, no one will be left out. God bless you. God bless our great country. Thank you very much.
Thank you for staying with us on the program. Well, Justice, let's get back to you. Is 1 week grace period adequate to reach a consensus that the tripartite National Minimum Wage Committee couldn't reach in about 5 months? Okay, we'll get back to Justice. Let me bring this to you, Sunday. Well, now Labour has given a 1 week break, and I'm wondering if that time is enough to reach a consensus that they couldn't reach with the committee in charge of this since it was set up in January 2024.
Well, from the actions of Labour since yesterday and from the pronouncements of their leaders, it means they have a preconceived mind. They have made up their mind before going to the negotiation table of what they are going to do. And what I just want to tell all Nigerians is that we are not all illiterates and we are not all ignorant of the law. In as much as I believe that the Labour has every right to ask and to demand from government the rights of Nigerian workers, at the same time, it should be done within the confines of the law. And they should not take Nigerians to ransom. They should not hold us to ransom.
All right, we understand we have a call on our Hassan. Thank you very much for joining us. What's your take on what's going on?
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me. My take is we need to just understand that these guys are opposition party. Labour is Labour Party. All these things they're doing, they're not doing it for Nigerians. For God's sake, growing up in Kano, if I can remember, and I still remember, if Babangida can remember, when we have strikes like this, the workers will put the light on. In fact, it's during strikes that we have 247 lights, because they will put the light on and leave. It is only when there is a fault that you have issues because they are on strike. But they will never put it off, shut the grid and leave. They don't do that. There have been strikes since we were growing up. The times of ASU strike and Labour will join ASU and they will strike. We've had such strikes so many times and no grid has ever been shut until this time. I think we had one, then twice with these people. I have said it so many times that this particular Labour has shown to Nigerians that it is partisan. They campaigned for their party. They own the Labour Party. They are angry that the president is making it and his intentions are good for this country. So whatever it is they want to do to sabotage this government, they're doing it as opposition party.
All right,
not as people speaking for Nigerians.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us.
People and you tell them you're fighting for them. They are starving Nigerians when they put off the lights. You can't be putting our lives into misery and you tell us you're fighting for us.
All right, Awa Hassan, thank you for your perspective. I understand Justice is back. Yes. Justice, how hopeful are you that in this 1 week grace period we would reach, do you call it El Dorado now, reach a consensus?
Okay, I will call it truth instead of El Dorado, because just like Kike also said, it will never end. And I also don't pray that it ends. There should always be pressure and resistance, some form of legal resistance to the government. Otherwise, the government will rest on its oars and just be doing exactly, be acting exactly based on its own whims and caprices. So I feel that, yes, I think I'm very, very positive that they know that they are beating more than they can chew, especially with respect to crossing clear legal red line. And I know that they know if they further play hardball, the Attorney General may now have to take the bull by the horn and actually prosecute them, which I expect the Attorney General to do anyway, whether or not they come to a truce based on this 5-day gap. So I'm just positive that they won't resume this strike.
All right, Justice. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us. But based on one of those resolutions reached, I'm wondering what will become of that. No worker would be victimized as a result of the industrial action. But then thank you very much for sharing the legal perspective with us on the program today.
Because agreement is agreement.
Yes.
As Wike always says. You've reached an agreement. You cannot persecute anybody. They were irresponsible in the manner they were beating people just to enforce the strike, clearly against our laws. But what we are saying is never again.
All right,
never again. Don't let anybody get close to shutting down the national grid. Don't victimize them. Right. As you already got into an agreement, so don't go against the agreement. But nobody should be permitted again to put his filthy hand on our national grid and then switch it off. It should not happen again, except if those in government are saying that they are not up to their jobs.
All right, you want to wrap up in about
and
15
that
seconds?
People should not take Nigerians for granted because they are fighting for their rights. They are not fighting for us when they are punishing us in an unreasonable way.
All right then, gentlemen, it's been so good having you on the program today. Tunde Abato and Babajide Kolade Otutoju. Thank you very much for your thoughts and the expose. Well, that's it on Journalist Hangout today. Join us tomorrow for another episode of the program. You can watch the repeat broadcast of this at 11. Join us on Sunday from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. for Journalist Hangout on Sunday. We're on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Abosede Adeniyi Aderemi. Bye for now and God bless Nigeria.
That's it. The regular football season is over.
What?
Yes, it's over.
Oh no, no.
But not for us here at Supersport. We've got your favorite players. Only they won't be playing for your favorite clubs. That's because they'll be playing for their countries in Euro 2024 exclusively on Supersport.
Yeah! Whoopsie. Sorry. That's actually a pretty big deal.
Catch all 51 games of Euro 2024 only on Supersport. Stay connected to DSTV to watch all the action on Supersport.